evangelistic service of outreach and its fruitfulness to us. And again, we're going to be back at it this Sunday again. But first Sunday, we launched a series, talked to you about families and about laid out a introductory lesson. 3 points from that first preaching on first Sunday was that no families are perfect. There are no perfect families in the Bible. Secondly, that however you can have if you use godly principles and implement godly values in your interactions and dealings, you can have a family, though not perfect. You can have a striving, thriving, successful family. And then third point with that message was that even though families are not perfect, families require work, and we have to be willing to work at making our families better. And then last week, Wednesday, we from primarily the scripture, and I'll read the scripture again just for a basis that we looked at from the scripture in the three things that we took away from Proverbs chapter 24. Proverbs 24:3, just as a good scripture reminder, the three things that build a family from Solomon's instruction and Solomon's proverb of chapter 24, verses 3 and 4. Through wisdom is a house established or builded, and by understanding it is established, and by knowledge shall the chambers or rooms be filled with all precious and pleasant things. So we looked at wisdom, knowledge, and understanding being the fundamental attributes and foundational pillars that build families. And if you operate in your families and you really want to have a purposeful heart and intention, focused intention to make your family better, it's three things that the Bible lifts up. And what was astonishing, again, what was enlightening, what was surprising to us, this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding is what will make, it didn't ever say anything about love. And it didn't say anything about love building your family. It didn't say anything about money building your family. It didn't say anything about material things building your family. It didn't say anything about sex building your family. It says, but by wisdom, by understanding, and by love is your family built and strengthened, and houses is established. And three things that happen, the three attributes is wisdom, understanding, and love. But the results and what it produces, what those three things produce, they produce a foundation. First of all, it's built, it's established. Secondly, after it's built, it's established, some longevity, some security, some constancy. And third thing, it fills the house, the chambers, the rooms of your family, the details of your family after your family is built. Because we build families when, biblically, when husband and wife, or mother and father get together, have children, and then you're starting to build your family. And the way you build it is not with brick and mortar. You build it through wisdom, through understanding, and through knowledge. And then once it's built, you got to establish it, solidify it, secure it, make it solid. And then the details start to have to be added to the family, the intricacies, especially, and I'm going to teach later on a few more weeks, a couple of weeks, actually the month of July is set aside for parenting. So I would really want to get into that in detail during that time. But then the details, the rooms of your house, the chambers of the house is established by understanding. The details are gotten to, the edges, sharp edges are shaved off. The relationship is the cement, the glue of the relationship is understanding, especially, and we'll talk more when they start getting into those teenage years and beyond, and even adult. When you have your children start becoming adults, it takes a different grace and a different understanding and a different spirit after it's built, after it's established, than when they were in Pampers and in diapers. You got to deal with them on adult level. And then you got to deal with them from a lot of understanding. You can't be impetuous. You can't be, so on guard. You can't be emotional with them. Even in the sense, I'm not saying don't use emotion, but you can't be emotional. You got to use a lot of understanding. You can't have as the older that your children get, and we'll talk about that as we move forward and further in other details. But that's the summary of what we talked about last two lessons. Just want to add one because I want to talk about blended families tonight. I want to get to that point of dealing because we're in a day and time, and I think it's interesting when you start looking at the stats that how much blended families come into play and how prolific, how common it is. Just a few other points about family. Remember now, the purpose of family, we looked at it, is for reproduction purposes, to replenish children, to reproduce children and to replenish the earth. So we looked from the Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 account. God didn't introduce just by a lot of bells and whistles that this is family. He just made it a natural part of his creation, a natural part of evolution, a natural part of birthing, of establishing, that he brought Adam and Eve together. Remember, families are prototypes for society. People tend to think, and we're living in a day, it appears that governmental institutions and laws and even education schools and other systems are trying to affect or produce families, but the biblical model is the reverse. The biblical model is the families produce everything else we have in society. All right, we're trying to do now, push down, set laws, let Washington, let the State House, let the City Hall, and let township, city, municipalities pass rules, laws, et cetera. There's going to be a great debate coming up about the Roe versus Wade. The abortion issue is going to be front and center. That there's a lot involved with that politically that's coming up. But God never intended for governments to do the job of families. God has, remember now, he established families before governments. He established families before the church. He established families before any other institution. He could have did it the reverse, and that's to say that good families make good churches. Good families make good communities. Good families make good governments. Good family makes good nations. Good families make, good institutions of all sort. And so if you got a corrupt, you talk about your government being corrupt. Corrupt governments come from corrupt families. Did y'all get that? If corrupt governments and corrupt everything else, comes from, the social justice about policemen, good and bad policemen, they're coming from a family. All right, that's corrupt. The good policeman, the good government is coming from a good family base. All right, whatever profession you want to look at and however you want to look at it, every mass murderer, every terrorist, every social ill repute, every lawyer, doctor, judge, every rapist, every PhD candidate, every success and every failure, every person in prison, every person in college came from family. Did y'all get that? So I keep reminding you of what Mother Teresa says, how do you get to world peace? Go home and love your family. What's the solution? What's the answer? Develop better families. The answer is in the home. The answer is in the home. The problem is in the home, and the answer and the solution is in the home. That's where it emanates from. Now, we've gotten away from that. It almost sounds like, even as I teach this in church and teaches in Wednesday Bible study, I mean, it's almost even in the body of Christ and in churches everywhere. I mean, you don't get a whole lot of contemporary teaching on families. You get preaching and teaching on a whole lot of things, subject matters, millennials, social media, this, that, and the other, and current events. But the bedrock, the basic instruction from the Holiness Church was founded on the fact of dealing with families. Families. And every ill in society can be cured or can be caused from the home. Y'all looking at me like y'all don't agree with that. Every ill of society is caused or cured by the home. Caused or cured by the home. By the home, that because you get it has to start in the home. Before the teacher starts to teach or tries to discipline. They're given a child, a boy or girl, that came from a home. Yes. Yep. Yep. No, it's not. The other part of that verse is that when they're old, they will not depart. There's a couple nebulous or open-ended or none-defined words. What age are they old? Didn't say when they're 13 they won't depart. Didn't say when they're 25 they won't depart. Didn't say when they're 35. It says when they're old. What does that mean? At what point are they old? I don't know if that means age 99 or I don't know if that means age 19. I mean, then that word train, and I won't do it now, but I will deal with that scripture with parenting a little deep because I got an insight into that. I think that train them up in the way to go. I think we got a different understanding. We think that means just bringing them to church, teach them God, put godly principles. Yes, it means that, but I think it's a little deeper than that. That word has something in there about developing them according to their bent, B-E-N-T. Developing them according to their likeness, tapping into their uniqueness, train them up in the way they should go, in according to how God has created them and gifted them, and wants to use them. And the job of the parent is to tap into that child and be so intricately attuned to that child to know which way to help bend them. That's a whole different than what we just usually traditionally say, train them up in the way they should go. And then the question, which way shall it go? That our way? Are we teaching them? Train them up according to how God has already gifted. Because every child has a unique. Every child is individual. And every child has a unique gift calling, a unique skill set, a unique creativity. And you got to find and tap into what that child's strength is and bent and I'm going to use the word propensity is, and then you got to bend them, train them to that. And then when they're old, they won't boomerang back. They'll stay in that vein, in that path. Yes. Yes. Right. Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Right. I understand clearly. You're right on. You're right. You're right on. Right. Right. That's true. That's true. And then part, I think, what maybe Ella Lundy's question, which is everybody's question experience, any and most all parents, all of us go through that and go. A lot of that has to deal with the frustration and or disappointment of the parent or from the parent. From this perspective, they don't turn out to be what we thought they would turn out to be, or what we wanted them to turn out to be, or what we desire for them to turn out to be. And we have to be careful in that area too. Because they have to chart. The job of the parent all right, is to train the child, instruct the child, develop the child, provide to the child what they need to make it in life, to be able to fly on their own wings, all right, to be able to bring them from childhood to adulthood. And then when they get to adulthood, we can't keep controlling though we may want to, because there's no switch. There's no parent switch that you turn on and turn off. Once that parent switch gets turned on, it's on. But the job of the parent is to train, nurture, develop, train, and then release the child. And it's in the releasing of the child that parents have problems. Yeah, they have problems. And then when we release them, we want to tell them where to fly to. And that's our frustration. That's our frustration. We taught them how to flap their wings, but we want to release them and then dictate their flight. When you release them, release the bird, the air is theirs. The world is there, but there's frustrations in that. And so, but we got to, huh?
Birds don't fly back.
No, they don't. Birds, he said birds don't fly back. You're correct.
You got kids, you got old babies in the house.
And they're staying with us longer and longer. You can hear testimonies of people that say, I left down south when I was 16 years old. I was on my own since I was 14. I've been working since I was 13. Well, he's 35 and ain't got a job yet. Am I right? Anyway, you had another question. Was that? Oh, you have another question? Or was
Well, that was
okay.
basically, now where you were saying as far as teaching, it used to be an old saying where it say you better watch who you having your babies by.
Yep, that too.
Okay? And what happens is it basically is talking about the genetics.
Yeah, yep.
That's from the genetics.
Yes.
And a lot of times it might skip a generation, but you better do some homework or you'll be working with a 60-year-old baby.
Genetic, and see, that's part of the problem of parenting. That's part of that training them in the way they should go. And I'm hopefully that's going to lead me into blended families. I'm going to get there eventually this week or next. But the blended family issues are very interesting because units are brought together. Families are trying to be established by he or she, husband or wife, mother and father, whoever, had children that you didn't have anything to do with, and you bring them into the household, and you've got to parent them or you got to give direction, but they're not yours. And then not being yours, you don't know the DNA. You don't know the DNA. You don't know, and then with also the having children out of wedlock, and a lot of times from sometimes whether they're one night stands or whether they're no relationship children. When children are birthed where there's no solid relationship, whether it be marriage or not marriage, whether you don't understand the person that you've copulated with, and you don't know their propensity, their DNA. So when Junior's acting the way he's acting, you don't know what's causing that. If that's normal for that DNA, or is that abnormal? It's hard enough when you know the DNA, because you said it does. It skips a generation. It skips a generation sometimes, and when you know the DNA, you're involved with that parent. You know the mother or the father and what they're prone to do and what their siblings and what their family is doing. When you go to the family reunion, I keep saying, you don't go to the family reunion to eat. You at the family reunion taking notes. You're observing. You better watch and see what Uncle Bob and what Auntie Jean and what Cousin Joe and what nephew and niece Suzanne and you're there to observe and to watch in a dating situation, because that's the best thing you can do, because you're gonna learn a whole lot. You're gonna hold. Don't try to be thinking that the one you with is different from them.
That's right. That's right.
he and or she came from them. Let me slide into another, a little deeper. Grandchildren, just a little. Psalm 78, and then I want to switch over to blended family. But Psalm 78, you know what I realize and what you realize, what you know. But I'm just saying what you already know, making you aware. When you deal with family, even from a biblical perspective, we deal with family from a sociological perspective, and from a current situation. It's so many types, shapes, sizes, definitions, and issues that's under the umbrella of family that you almost can't categorize it, or you got to deal with a broad brush. You know, family, there's a lot of issues and ills and circumstances, situations under family, even, parenting, and then when you start parenting, are you talking about parenting a baby, newborn parent, or are you talking about parenting a teenagers? That's two different things. Or are you talking about parenting those who got married, left home, and came back? That's a whole other thing. Or parenting adolescents, or parenting those that are, from blended family. If you're talking about family, what type of definition of family? Is it a blended family? Is it a traditional husband-wife family who the children were born under the same house? Or is it a blended family that two people who had been divorced, or one been married, one not been married, got together, and they brought 3 kids with them, who already had spent 7, 8 years in some sort of family structure, whatever it is, functional or dysfunctional. And now you're asking them to adapt and to adjust. Just because the man and the woman like each other and want to marry each other, you have no guarantee that the children going to like each other. That's eros love with husband and wife, man and woman. You're talking about filial family, sibling to sibling, brother to brother, brother to sister, sister to brother. That's a whole nother set. It's hard to get brothers and sisters and siblings to love each other when you're all in the one household. There's a lot of challenges there. You got to break up fights constantly. Johnny, don't treat your sister like that. So, Junior, stop doing that. Bob, Steve and Bobo, y'all stop wrestling and fighting. You stop hitting them on the head. You don't do them like this. You don't throw them off the bed. And that's from your same blood, same household, same DNA. And that's all of us who got children have been through that and got to go through that. And that's what you know. Now you're bringing up somebody that has had a set of rules for 10, 7, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 years, and now you bring them into a brand new situation, and there's baggage from the previous situation. Just because you mended from the divorce or the breakup, and you're ready to get somebody else, don't mean they ready for another mama or daddy. And they holding on to, by the way, you ain't my mama and you ain't my daddy. It's a lot to deal with. Psalm 78. I'm switching because y'all got me flip a little bit, but I want to deal with grandchildren just a little bit, and I'm going to make a statement about this. Psalm 78, 78 number of Psalms, and verse 4. Psalm 78 and 4. We will not hide them from their children, which we talking about. This is Moses' prophecy dealing with the Mosaic propagation of the law, all right, from Deuteronomy chapter 4, and we'll not hide the laws of God. We'll not hide them from our children, showing to the generation to come the praises of the Lord. Now, we will not hide what God has done from our children. You shouldn't hide what God has done from your children. Matter of fact, you got to keep reciting. God told Moses to tell the Hebrew children in Deuteronomy 6, to teach your children when you sit down in the morning, morning, noon, and night, really. When you walk by the way, when you lay down at night, you can read that. They had to instruct them in the law of the Lord, and it was a constancy, continual teaching them. Not just, don't send them to vacation Bible school and think they're going to get all their godly teaching from that, and you haven't taught them nothing, morning, day, and night. All right, the church supplements and adds to what the home is already teaching. And if it's not being taught in the home and they come to church, they're hearing foreign instruction. And the church has to try to, for the hour and a half, 2 hours, we may have them, or the youth team, youth department may have them, ministry may have them, and they got to go back into an environment that don't support nothing they just heard for 2 hours in church. But he said we will not we will not hide from them our children, showing to them the generation to come the praises of the Lord and His strength. Show to the generations to come, not just your children, you are. This is get into the next grandchildren. Generation, you got to show them and tell them about the strength of the Lord, what God's able to do, what God's might. You got to tell your testimony to your grandchildren and to your children, and let them know the praises of the Lord and what He's wanted to do with His strength and His wonderful works that He hath done. You gotta tell our children and grandchildren the wonderful works. Tell them what God has done in your life. All right, and you truthfully got to tell them the good and the bad. Yes, you can tell them what God has done, but in some of that stories, at some point, at the appropriate time, you got to lift up to them because they're struggling and gonna make mistakes, and they don't know that you made the same mistakes because you've heard your story, your testimony from them, and so they look like they think they're a misfit or out of step because they think they ain't perfect. But you got to share with them and free them up to deal with life. All right, and you got to tell them about the wonderful works of the Lord, what He has done. Verse number 5: For He established a testimony in Jacob. Historical. God did some things for Israel, historically and traditionally. You bring them out of Egypt, letting them go across the Red Sea, drying up the Red Sea, feeding them manna from in the wilderness, healing them when they got bit by the snake, by the serpent. Letting water come out of a rock. You got to tell them the testimonies what He did, and appointed a law in Israel which He commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children. That they should make them known to their children. Your children need to hear from you the historical works of God in the life of your family. And your children need to hear from you what God has done for you and your family, during times and they cannot remember, were not old enough to know. You got to tell them the historical workings of God and your family and what He's done for you all. Verse number 6, that the generations to come might know them, even the children which should be born. The generations to come got to know the goodness of God, the works of God, the strength of God, what God is able to do, what God can do. All right. Even the children that are not yet born, that should be born, and should arise and declare them to their children. You got to tell it to your children so your children can tell it to their children and their children. And don't worry about them saying and thinking that everybody thinks and says they're not going to be like their mama, they're not going to be like their daddy until they get children. When they get children, one day, somewhere or another, they wake up and start looking and they say, uh-oh, I sound like my mama. I said I wasn't going to do that. I said I wasn't going to do it. I sound like my daddy. I sound like, like I hear myself sounding like what my father said to me. Because there's no manual. Children don't come with a manual book, an instruction book. It's trial and error. Is here and there. You have to discover and pray upon and almost happen upon how to raise your children. And the best instruction we got, we raise them how we were raised. We go back to what we were raised. Even though we declared we ain't gonna do what our fathers did, we ain't gonna do what our mothers did, and you ain't got no other example but that. So your knee jerk, what you go back to is how was I raised? So they can declare them to their children's children. Verse 7, that they may set their hope in God. That they may set their hope in God. We, parents and grandparents, even more so, have to help our grandchildren set their hope in God. If your children didn't get it, you got another chance with grandchildren. And the truth of the matter is, it's interesting, somebody said you really won't know how good of a father you've been or how good of a mother you've been until your grandchildren come along. Your children not going to let you know whether you did how good of a job you did. But you know how you know? You start listening to your children talk to their children. And you sit back and you start hearing some of the stuff that you said to them that you didn't think they even knew or heard, and then they repeat it. So this God deals in generations, you all. This is not, we like instant gratifications. We want to see the handiwork of our labor right now, and it takes some years to develop these folk. By law, it takes 18 years. By American law, it takes 18 years before they're grown. By law, just by civil law, it takes 18 years. But all of us know. You might can add another 18 on that, but that's by law. By law. And by actions and by deeds, by maturity and by life struggles and by how they handle life, it may take a little bit more than that. Remember you didn't used to be grown until you were 21. They changed the law and dropped it down to 18. Now they're trying to do some things to drop it down to 16. They had drivers, couldn't even start driving straight until 16. Now they got that down to 14. And 9 months, I think, and then you got graduated license where you got some probationary periods and and now you end up with what we end up with. Everybody driving down the street with a cell phone, and they don't even know how to handle the car. They don't understand that they drive it in the left lane, the fast lane, driving slow. They don't even know what the left lane is for, because they're not mature enough to understand that. You don't understand, all the other nuances of driving. Yeah, they passed the test. Still can't drive. Because we've been reducing, decreasing their responsibility, their laws, and giving them responsibility and then the family unit has broken down, so they're not, we had a situation, this is so real. I sit on the board of directors for one of the schools, for university prep schools, a system of schools. We got in Detroit, some charter schools, and we moved into a brand new building down in Detroit. Wonderfully restored, renewed, put millions of dollars in it to renewed. And the first week we were in the building, one of the parents was teaching, this is the high school, one of the parents was teaching their child how to drive in the school parking lot. Had them drive them to school, and when you let your kids, like any parents that got school-age children, know the busiest time in the morning when they dropping off a kid, and that evening when you come to pick them up, there's certain drop-off points, like you just see right here, it gets crowded. This parent got their child driving during congestion, busy school hours, dropping off and picking up, and he thought he was hitting the brake and hit the accelerator, and ran into the school. Well, that happens. Any of us that have taught our children to drive, here's where I believe, here's the fault of that. And it's not necessarily the kid's fault because he's learning how to drive and those kind of things happen. Here's the fault of the parent. When I was being taught, they took my father way out there in the car in a mile of me. In an open parking lot, in an open space with nothing there. It wasn't even on the street. Right. It was, anybody else? It was in a parking lot. We didn't learn how to drive in a crowded, at the school time, in the turnaround, around drop-off point. That's parental decisions. Right. Yeah. Every child's problem is not a youth child's problem. It's parenting problems. The children can get blamed or has the better the consequences of it. Well, let me deal with back with this. Verse number 7, that they may set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments. That's why you got to talk to them, instruct them, tell them your testimony. Let them know what God's able to do, the strength of God, the wonderful works of God, the praise of God. You got to tell them the history of God in your family. The history of God in you. I told you, that a couple years ago, I think it was 2.5 years ago, I sat down and I wrote our three children, I wrote them a letter. Actually ended up being, I thought it was going to be just a one page. It ended up being, I think, 9 pages. It turned out being basically a testimony and a history with documented facts and an account of what God has done through their great-grandparents and through their grandparents on both sides, and tried to talk to them about the realities of God and what our family was able to achieve, all right, with almost nothing. And my whole point of it was not just to give a historical account, but say to them, my expectation of you is higher than what you're reaching. Y'all missed that. But I gave them a whole litany, 9-page litany, and that was their Christmas gift. I went and got bought some real nice paper, the real parchment, put it in a very nice cover, all right, wrapped it up in a gift, Sister Cannon, and I put it under the tree. Now I gave them something else, but that to me was the most valued thing they can have, a regurgitation, a recital of this is who you are historically. This is the seed you come from. This is what's in your genes. This is how your foreparents made it in tough, difficult situations without the conveniences that you have today. And if they can do it then, the bar is too high for you, so stop. So, there's no room for crying and weeping excuses and what you can't do and what you can't achieve and how you've been, all of this entitlement mentality. You're entitled to make it through the struggle. That's what you're entitled. That's what you're entitled to do. You're entitled to keep on struggling and make it through the struggle. That's what you're entitled, huh? Well, yeah, they try to, anyway, so I read the Psalm 78 verse to say to you all again that you won't know if the good job you did as a parent, with your children until you really see your children raising their children. And when you see your children raising their children, and then you'll see the values that you instilled in them. You'll see the principles. You'll see the morals, the moral standards, you're going to get back what you gave out. You'll get back what you gave out. Any questions before I'm turning the page, moving? That was just that. The blended family situation, and let me define, when I say blended family, I'm talking about non-traditional family marriage like we know it, where a man goes out and selects a wife, and a man and a woman becomes husband and wife, and and they start off brand new, no children, just married. They give birth to children, establish a home and a family, and the children are born under that same roof if they choose to have family. And what more so, we're living in a day now. 42%. A National Pew research study said that 42% of all adults that were polled said that they have at least one step relative. 42%, and this is a few years ago, so about 5 years ago, it may be higher. At least 42% of every adult that was polled said they have at least one step relative. Now, that could be stepmother, stepfather, stepson, stepdaughter, stepchildren, whatever. 42%. Current estimates is that 40% of married couples today, 40% of married couples with children today make up what's called blended families. 40%. 1/3, or more than 1/3, almost 1/2, 50, it's more than 1/3. 40% of all married couples that today are, and what you got with that, you can almost consider that as second marriages. You can almost consider that as blended families, meaning non-traditional first-time marriage that will raise children. So approximately 1/3 of all weddings today, every new wedding, approximately 1/3, 33% of every marriage today is comprised of blended families. 1 out of 3 of every wedding, every marriage that happens is a marriage that's happening with their children already there. Even if it's two people that's never been married before and they had children before they got married, that's a blended family. First time marriage, but you got some youngins coming with you. That's a definition of a blended family. All right. And you know what's interesting about blended family? Sociologists and society, and the difficulty of having a successful, remember, there are no families are perfect. There are no perfect families. But the difficulties of mixing, of uniting a blended family, it goes up, it's just astronomical. I mean, studies have shown, that blended families have more stress. There's extra stressors in blended families, more obstacles to overcome in second marriages and blended families. Many blended families fall prey to divorce. The divorce rate is above 50% for persons that never been married before. First-time marriages, divorce is more than half of first-time marriages divorce. More than half, more than 50%. Now, and most people, what's interesting, most people who divorce, most divorced people you are, this is interesting, look to marry again. And the divorce rate for second marriages, all right, goes from 50% up to 65% or 60% for the second marriages. And then most people who have been married twice still want to get married again. And the divorce rate for persons who've been married twice, when they get married again, that divorce rate for third marriages, 75%. Are y'all getting it? So it's like the more they marry, and there's reasons for that. There's just think about it. There's a lot of reasons. Part of the reasons is, number one, after the first divorce, the real issues were never dealt with. People, you're on the rebound. People kind of enter another relationship to cover up their hurts and deal with their emotional emptiness and isolation. So not to feel the pain of that divorce and all the pain it brings, you just go get another one. Without analyzing why did the first one mess up. And then they got another one. Now you've doubled from 50% of the first marriage, now 65% of second marriages, and then you do it again. Now a 75% chance for third marriages, you're divorced. Yes. Is it a good idea? Doesn't seem like it. There are some biblical guidelines, but people are not. The stats I gave you are not for saved for folks. Even though, let me say this, divorce in churches is higher than what it should be, but it's high too. But people are not considerate and consulting what the Bible said about my next marriage.
No way, no conviction.
I mean, I'm talking about the general population. All right, and this is hard to get church folk to consider what the Bible, because everybody got their own idea that they're doing their own thing, and they see, and they're only what the Bible said, that they're in their own imagination. They're only good in their own imagination. So that's why it goes up, because for several reasons you didn't deal with it before. The real issues, the root causes. But secondly, you jump into it, and if I divorce once, I can divorce again. It's easier for me the second time. And if I divorce twice, I'm good at it now. I know how to do it. So I can do it. So I'm gonna get rid of you. I'm gonna have less patience with you now. Now the stats I gave, I'm talking about marriage. This is a National Pew study. This is talking about marriages in general, without having nothing to do with religion or spiritual condition. It'd be interesting, but there are some stats that deals with Christianity and with those who confess Christ, and they're not. I hate to even say it, not much better, percentage-wise. Yes. Well, it's some truth in it, but I told you what my experience has been is you get persons in there, when they come to my office for marital counseling, this is 28 years now, of pastoring, or 29 years. First, and in more recent times, in more last 3 to 5 years, they don't come, Mother Faniel, for me to resolve or for me to give them solutions. They come for me to validate their position. And they come for me to co-sign on what they already arrived to. They almost come in saying, Pastor, he's wrong. My husband ain't know. I want you to tell him he's wrong. Tell him he's wrong, so I'm getting rid of him. Or she's wrong. He says she's wrong, and then she needs to hear from you because she don't listen from me because I'm divorced. And so that's validating. That's for me to co-sign. They're already mine. And here's the other part. Here's the other thing. And you come, and then you get to the point when you start saying, why are you divorcing? Do you love her? Yeah, I love her. She's all right. She's been my girl for a while. We've been together for 25 years. She does this well. She does that well. She does that. Well, why? Because I can't live with her because I'm sick of her. She's crazy. But I love her. And then you say to her, do you really want the divorce? I thought I could. I've been trying to live with him. He was this and that to me. He's good. He provides. He takes care of the kids. He's a wonderful father. He takes care of my kids. Well, why don't y'all consider staying together? No. I can't live with him no more. He don't communicate, or he got this problem, or he cheated, or he did that, or he won't change, or da-da-da-da. So, I'm saying to Mother Faniel, your definition of love and the way you're saying it in context, you're right. But they're saying almost love ain't enough. Marriage is, I keep saying this to you all, I'm going to say it to you, marriage is relational. It's relationship. You got two human beings. You don't have two angels. You have two celestial beings. You got two fallen, faulty, sinful, saved but by grace individuals, male and one female, who comes together with a whole lot of baggage, and they want it their way. It can come. There's some genetics and some other ethics in it too. Genetics and every other ethic you can think about in it. You know what I mean? And so it's relational. And Mother, and I hear what you're saying. What you're saying got some premise to it, but you got to deal with the reality of it. Is that the word commitment and the word compatibility, what I'm coming to learn, what I'm looking at, what I'm experiencing, what I'm starting to delve into, those two words mean more. I don't know if I should say mean more, but I think produces greater longevity. Let me put it that way. Produces greater longevity than the word love, because love has too many definitions. But if you are committed to the marriage or committed to the other person, if two persons are committed to each other, that commitment says, I ain't going nowhere. I don't care what happened. Well, we're going to have to stick it out. We're going to stay there. I'm committed to you, to staying here. Wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. The Bible is right. How many people do we know our foreparents? I mean, can we be real? Our foreparents, aunties, uncles, extended family, the African American family in the South, and before we came up north and got good jobs and even all that. We know a whole lot of people that stayed with each other, and they wasn't in no love.
That's right. 60 years.
Can I talk? Is that true, you all? And grandmama or great grandmama or whatever you want to call it, Gigi or Nana or Nanny, whoever she was, Big Mama, knew he wasn't no good.
That's right. Stayed with him.
Whether he was a drunk or whether he was a rebel rouser, whether he was a whoremonger, whether he was going with everybody, whether he did it, and in some cases didn't work. Never divorced.
That's right.
What kept them there? Was it love?
No, commitment.
It was the fact that they said, I do.
That's right.
Now, other social economic factors that may have come in is that they may have had that feeling of, I can't go anywhere else. Most time in those cases, either the one woman and in some cases the man wasn't educated enough, and they felt like they had no alternative, no option, no out. Other times it was that, well, we got 5 children together, and I'm gonna stay here, and even after the children, you're gonna stay till they're grown, and then they get grown, then they're 35 and 45, and you still staying together. Then they done flew the nest, and you're still together. What is that? Was that love that kept them together, or that was a made up mind that says I ain't going nowhere? And that made up mind is commitment. The men said that who worked, and from a financial perspective saying, but then and when we got into our a little bit more economically sufficient and sustaining, divorce goes up. Because you got options, then they passed the no-fault divorce law. Before even the no-fault came, when you had to really, you had to prove or go through a divorce. You had to, it was before no-fault. Now it's nobody's at fault. Let's just decide to break up, go down to the court, fill out a paper, pay the filing fee, and we're gone. Before that, you had to prove somebody had to be at fault. Then cities and government starts passing no fault, and now there's a whole. Michigan implemented a waiting period, 6 months, I think. I think it's 6 months. You got to wait 6 months. You got to file. If you file today, you got to, even if it's not contested and no fault, you can't get divorced for 6 months. And then the referee or the judge revisit to give you 6 months to think about it. And to cool off or to change your mind or to do something. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't work. Let me say this about the Bible, about blended families too. But what's interesting, when you look at the Bible, you all, and the Bible gives us everything we need. Blended families, though the statistics says they're going up, 40% of marriages are over 1/3 now is blended family. There's always been what we're calling blended family. We didn't call it like that. The Bible has blended families. All right, I know it seems to be an upward trajectory, but when you look at Abraham was married to Sarah, right? God made him a promise. Sarai made a promise, Abram and Sarai, and then God said you're gonna have children. What did Abram do? Hagar. What Hagar comes in the picture, right? So Abraham at Sarah's suggestion. Any Bible readers in here? Right? At Sarah's suggestion, he goes into Hagar because a baby, the cultural norm was a baby born under your household. Hebrews define family as everybody under your household, under your roof. So babies born under your roof, it's still your family. It's still the rights in the air. So she sends her maidservant, bondwoman, into Hagar, unto Abraham, her husband, and he conceives. By the way, let me just drop this on you, which said physiologically that Abe didn't have the problem. Y'all get that later. Y'all get that later. Because he goes into Hagar, right? Baby's born. I don't care how old he is, baby's born. All right. And so now Hagar has given Abraham a baby, and the baby Ishmael, his name Ishmael, grows up. He's about 12 or 13 or 15 till he's a teenager. And Sarah looks out the window, sees Ishmael, playing and toying or doing something against her son, until Sarah was okay until she got pregnant. Y'all read, I'm paraphrasing the story. You got to read. I don't have time to go into details. Because Ishmael was her whole thing because that was her husband's seed. And she was okay. Hagar seemed to be an okay. We don't see no contention between Sarah and Hagar until this incident, until after Sarah gets pregnant and gives birth to Isaac. and then Ishmael and Isaac out in the yard, doing some things, playing or whatever they're doing, and he's making fun or he's abusing him. One translation really says that Ishmael is abusing Isaac. And then Sarah says, you and your mama got to go. Ain't that what the Bible said? Sarah has a talk with Abe. Come here, Abe. I got something to say to you. You come here, brother. I'm gonna put something in your ear. On tomorrow, both of them going. Now the problem was Ishmael was contending with Isaac, but Sarah's solution wasn't to get rid of Ishmael only, but the baby mama got to go. Now, how did she arrive? Hagar ain't done nothing to Sarah. But something been brewing. He said, no, both of them going. Abe didn't waste no time. He didn't say nothing. God said, Abraham, do whatever she told you to do. You listened to it the first time. You better listen to it this time. That's what God said to Abraham, to Abe, right? And the next day, immediately, he didn't wait. He wakes up and prepares them, their traveling and stuff, and kicks them out. That's a blended family. And it didn't work out good. Didn't work out good. I'm going to talk to you, even going beyond there, about not just that incident, but the incident, about as we move forward. Jacob, all right, Jacob, y'all remember Jacob with Leah and Rachel, right? He worked 7 years he loved Rachel, but he didn't get Rachel. Laban didn't give him, he gave him Leah first, and then he worked 7 more years for Rachel, and then what ends up happening, y'all remember the story, that though he loved Rachel was the love of his life, but Leah started pushing out babies, right? And Leah starts pushing out babies, and then, in fact, she has about 10. She has some, and Rachel is angry. She goes and prays to the Lord and say, God, you're going to give me. So finally, Rachel finally has a baby whose name is Joseph. All right? And then she has a second baby after a period of time, Joseph's younger brother named Benjamin. Right? But you got Rachel who's living in the house with Jacob. And actually, when you read the scripture, Jacob had 2 maids or 2 concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah. Bilhah and Zilpah. So it was his 2 concubines, Bilhah, Zilpah, Rachel and Leah, living in the same house, and he had 10 children by Leah, and he had 2 children by the way, when Rachel has Benjamin, the younger boy, Rachel dies in childbirth. I remember that? I'm in the book in Genesis. Rachel dies in childbirth. And then, so you got a blended family. You got Jacob, Rachel, before she dies, Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah, and their children, and all the 12 children in the same house. That was a segue, and I won't be able to do it tonight, but I'll pick it up next Wednesday. So now Joseph comes into play. Y'all know the Joseph story. Joseph comes in, and then his brothers hated him. But the Bible says that Jacob loved Joseph because he was the son of his old age. Well, I think not only the son of his old age was one thing. That's a manly pride, proudly. But it was something else. Every time Jacob looks at Joseph, because Rachel's dead when she has Benjamin, every time Jacob looks at Rachel, because Rachel was his heart, y'all remember? He worked 14 years for Rachel, and she died. But Rachel gave him Joseph. So Joseph, his love for Rachel, who's dead now, is extended to his love for Joseph, who's Rachel's son, he and Rachel's son. And so every time he sees Joseph, he gives Joseph a coat of many colors. He favors Joseph over the other 10 children that Leah had. Are y'all with me? And when you start reading and looking at that story, you got blended family. And you got blended family troubles, and poor Joseph comes along, and, his dad plays favorites with him. Jacob plays favorites with him and picks him over all the children, gives him a coat that distinguishes him. The Bible said a coat of many colors. It distinguishes him from all the other boys. And then, because every time Jacob looks at Joseph, he's reminded about the love of his life, Joseph's mother, Rachel. And if you go back and look at even when Jacob, you look at before Jacob was the son of Isaac. You remember? Isaac and Rebekah got married. They had 2 children. What was the name? Jacob and Esau. Esau and Jacob, remember? And the Bible says, talk about that blended family, looking at it, well, not the blended family, but what the Bible says there was that Rebekah loved Esau, and Isaac loved Jacob. Isaac loved Jacob and Rebekah loved Esau, and then you get that mix up. All right? And so now Jacob is perpetuating with Leah and Rachel and with Joseph what he saw, what happened to his daddy Isaac and his mother Rebekah, how they played favorites with Jacob and Esau, the 2 brothers. So I said all that to say there are other issues. We look at David. David had a blended family. David's first wife's name was Michelle. He danced until he danced out of his clothes, and she's looking out the window, and she made fun of David about the king. Look at the king making fun of him. He danced out of his clothes, and he said something to Michelle about, he snapped back at her. And then David had, actually, if y'all read it, David had 28 wives. And the last wife David had was named Bathsheba. He had, Michelle was the first one, and then he had 28, and then Bathsheba, y'all know the one he had, Uriah's wife, all right, was his last wife, okay? And y'all know what happened with the David story, his family, how dysfunctional it was. Blended family. And it goes on and on. If you keep on looking at the Bible and read, and Solomon, don't even get into Solomon, and I'll close here because of time. Solomon had, 700 wives? And I think about 300 concubines. All right, and Solomon had so many wives, he wrote the book of Proverbs, and in the book of Proverbs, he keeps saying to the young man, just go with one, just keep one, just get one. You don't need, he read the Proverbs, he reads Proverbs 30, wrote Proverbs 31, about the Proverbs 31 woman, about how, how chaste and beautiful and how virtuous the Proverbs 31, and he writes all, and then at the end of the book of Proverbs, what Solomon writes, and he concludes at the end of Proverbs, he said, be satisfied with the wife of your youth. What are you saying, Solomon? Just stick with one marriage. Stay with the first one you marry. Because I done had 700 and then 300. And at the end, his advice to everybody else is, you stick with the first one. Let the wife of your youth satisfy. Just stay with that first, because somebody else said. In terms of when you think about it, and one man said, had he known about divorce for the second marriage, he said he could have stayed with the first one, if he'd known that the second. All of them are fallible, all men and women, on both sides. You're still getting a human being. You still getting somebody that got faults. You're still getting somebody that got to train. You're still getting somebody. A man is a man is a man is a man. I don't care how old, how young, how rich, how poor, how good. It's a matter of what you're going to put up, what you're going to endure. Because if you got a man, you're going to put up with something. A woman is a woman is a woman is a woman. And so you got to endure something, or you have the privilege and you have the right. And your singleness is not a death sentence, you all. Singleness, you can be happy in single. Marriage does not have to ruin singleness. I thought the single people would at least say amen, but anyway. Oh, did I hear? Thank you. Bless the Lord. Say to be continued. There's more, you all. There's a lot. This is a subject of family we got to talk about. And we got to get biblical insight and wisdom. I'm going to share some of the things with you about the blended family. I just want to introduce that. I thought it would get further because I want to share. I want to delve into some real situations of blended families in the Bible to give you some principles of what happened in the Bible, and then how can we avoid in blended families today? Because you got a lot of blended families. Whether you choose to, and it's a choice you make. It used to be a day and time that the church people, church men, I don't know about now, but the real saved, sanctified church boys, or church men, at one point in time would say they didn't want to marry anybody who had children. Now, I don't know if that's changed probably a lot now, huh? Some of it ain't changed. Well, okay, but okay. I mean, but nowadays, because of the numbers and because of circumstance, situation, I mean, and let me say because of proliferation, because. Am I right? I don't know if I say majority, let me say most. Let me use this term. Many of the eligible persons that are single on male and female side, once you filter through all the stuff you're going to filter through and all your checklists, and you get down to the bottom, you say, well, she has a child. After you done filtered through all of that, and check, throwing away this, throwing away that, and she meets this, she meets that, she halfway meets that, kind of like that, and then she has a child. You got a decision to make. Yes, ma'am. Right. Yeah. Right. It's not easy. No family. I preached to y'all first Sunday. No families are perfect. And the last conclusion was, perfectness is not the goal. Though you cannot won't have a perfect family, you can work to have a successful family. And all of them, it's a matter of choices. And you got to really. It comes down. You ought to get your offering. It's going to really come down to what your appetite is, and what it is you can stand and what you cannot stand. That's what it's going to come down to. For those that want to be involved with families, it's going to come down to what is it's unfortunate we almost living in I got to take the lesser of two evils route. The lesser of two evils. He ain't this, he ain't that, he don't that, but yeah, And it comes down to what can you deal with? And then he's thinking the same thing. You got to know it. You better know it before you get into it. 'Cause if you don't know it before you get into it, that's a whole nother teaching. What you see is what you get. But y'all do know that dating is a game, and it's designed for failure. It's a masquerade. Dating don't put forth the best feet. Dating covers up. By definition, dating, when you go on a date, you putting your best foot forward, and so is he. And there's a whole lot of stuff that's not talked about, not covered until. That's why I got to take many, even if they're not dates, many encounters. Many encounters. If you put time on it, time is going to reveal some things. I'm telling you, it's certainly going. Time is a tell-all. The question is, do you have the time to invest and to put in it? Because time is a tell-all.